Live from Shore Manor Studios, this is Tales from a Small Town Journalist with Matt Shore.
Hey guys, thanks for checking out this episode of Tales from a Small Town Journalist, the podcast dedicated to all the weird and wonderful stories you are only going to hear about from reporters working in small communities. Small communities just like yours. I'm Matt Shore, and I was one of those small town reporters for nearly 10 years before I finally hung up my notepad and my camera. And in those times, I managed to get some unique and interesting experiences working with the public, and I got to know a lot of other reporters out there who also had some unique and interesting experiences with the public. Now, before I go any further, I do want to make sure and mention that this is a listener-supported podcast supported by wonderful folks just like you. There are some great ways that you could show us some support. One option would be Patreon. We're updating that with fresh content every single week, and it's very inexpensive. Even just $1 will get you something. So feel free to go check out patreon.com/Matt Shore if you'd like to pitch in over there. We would definitely appreciate that. Another big one would be just to go over to our website and check out some of our shops, our online shop there, and check out some of that merchandise. Most all of it's books because I am a writer by trade. We've got spooky books, we've got science fiction books, we've got comic books, young and old. There's something for everybody. I hope you'll consider checking that out. And lastly, if you don't have the funds, that's perfectly fine. If you could just help spread the word, tell some folks about this goofy podcast and the goofy stories that we have to tell. Tell a friend, tell a loved one, get on Facebook, get on Twitter, get on TikTok. And now that the pandemic is subsiding, go ahead and get in somebody's face and shake them real good and say, hey, you have got to check out this wild podcast with Matt Shore. It's all about the weird stories that reporters have. This episode, I'm going to be chatting with Nicole Young from the Leaf Chronicle. She's the news director over there. Just in case anyone's not aware, I do contribute to that newspaper quite a bit, at least once or twice every month. It's first time I'd ever actually had a one-on-one conversation with her at length to this extent. We, of course, stay in touch as I contribute columns over there on a consistent basis, but this is the first time we really had a lengthy conversation about news, about what it means, and about just the experiences that we've had. And she's got some good ones. So I hope you'll stick around and check this out. It's some good stories, some good insights on just what journalism is and what we would like to see it continue to be and one day be, and maybe, if nothing else, also be perceived as something that it could be. So it's a wonderful conversation. Check it out. I'm going to kick things over now and chat with Nicole. This episode is brought to you by Moby Dick Back from the Deep, the webcomic chronicling the white whale's return in modern times as a zombified beast. This terrifying high seas adventure boasts more than 78,000 viewers, 4 successful Kickstarter campaigns, and numerous mentions on comic book and horror podcasts, e-zines, and more. Check out this monstrous tale at backfromthedeep.com if you dare. All right, I'm joined by Nicole Young, the news director for the Leaf Chronicle. Some listeners might be familiar with that because it is where I do still regularly contribute a humor column to them that they still think it's worthwhile. I hope that continues. But enough brown nosing while she's here. Nicole, welcome to the show.
Hello.
Thank you for joining me. I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm well. Brown nosing, that's funny. I really enjoy your column, by the way. Every week there's things about it that just crack me up. And then my news clerk, Kyle Watts, also reads your stuff religiously. And we both laugh about it because it's so funny and so real.
Well, thank
you. Thank you for having me.
No, I appreciate it. I love getting folks that are in my field to tell their stories because I've said this many times. Journalists have some of the most unique stories that we will ever hear. Being on the, I think a former news director there at the Leaf Chronicle once called it, they're on the front lines of history, whether it's national history or local history. So they get it all.
Absolutely. It's really interesting to see the evolution of the news business change and grow as well. We are constantly evolving in what we do. I'm sure you've noticed more and more of the going online route with things. Digital is kind of the future, so we're doing a whole lot more video, a whole lot more um, visual things that we can do only with the digital, platforms that we have. But lots of
Oh
fun,
yes.
lots of
Yeah,
fun.
yeah, I've seen a lot of that. Like I growing up, my parents were the type. My parents didn't drink coffee, which is interesting. Everybody's surprised by that. But they
Hmm.
every morning they had their fruit, their cereal, their breakfast, orange juice, and the newspaper. Read that thing every morning. There were two of them. There was a local paper, the Mayfield Messenger, where I worked for a little while, and they would also get the regional paper, which was the Paducah Sun, and they would read both of those every day, like 7 days a week. They never took a break. Well, now I'm an adult, have my own home, my family and everything. I read the news every day too, but I don't always have a print newspaper in front of me. I pull out my phone and that's where I read it. I am just enough of a millennial that I get my news from an app on my phone.
I'll tell you what, some of our older generation really, really enjoy the fact that they can access it on a phone or a tablet, especially tablets, because they can actually take the e-edition and make the font bigger so they can read it better on their iPads.
That's interesting. You would normally think that that's where you get the most pushback, but
Mhm.
they like the app, huh?
They do because they can, like I said, they can make the font bigger so they can read the text easier as on that medium as opposed to having the print product in front of them. I have memories as a child of watching my grandfather take a magnifying glass and read his paper with it at the kitchen table. He would literally just use the magnifying glass to blow the text up like you would with an iPad so he could read it. And those are some of the enduring memories that I have from childhood.
My
My
grandfather would
parents did
take
the
his
same.
glasses off and hold it over him. Did you ever do that? Hold it like a magnifying
Mhm,
glass?
mhm. Yes. And my parents, same as your parents, my parents will read the Dixon Herald, which, in Dixon is a small, biweekly paper. They read it and then they read the Tennessean every day. So kind of the same, kind of the same mentality that you grew up with, even to this day. So it is, I read everything online, obviously. So edit it usually before it goes in the paper. So it's kind of fun. So but I have conversations with my parents about the craziest things that I come across in my day-to-day existence.
Oh, there's got to be plenty of those, and I want to hear as many as we can get to.
Oh,
But
uh,
first, let's tell anybody listening just your story, how you got into. Because I mean, you weren't born a news director. Like, what brought you to this stage in life?
well, we moved to Tennessee from Mobile, Alabama, where I was born when I was 6. And when we moved here, I would write updates to my grandmother back home in Mobile, usually on a weekly basis, just to kind of be like, this is what's going on up in Dixon, and we miss you, and yada yada yada. And my mom, from that point all the way through high school, was like, someday you're going to be a writer. I just guarantee it. But when you're a teenager, you rebel, you just do. So I thought, I think I want to go into like nursing or something. So I went off to school in as a nursing major, and it lasted all of 2 semesters because I was like, what am I doing? I would constantly go and take English classes for fun. Like that was literally the thing that I looked forward to the most. I would have like 1 or 2 English classes a semester, and I just couldn't wait to go to those classes. And I finally sat down one day and I was just like, what am I doing? My mom was right. You shouldn't second guess your mother. That's pretty much what I'm going to get across to you with the story. Never second guess your mom because she's
Spoken
usually
like a true
right.
Alabama person.
Yes. So basically, after the rebellion that really never was, because I kind of saw the light of day pretty early on, I switched majors, decided on a communications major with an English minor. Did that during my junior year. Between my junior and senior year, I got lucky. That's pretty much the motto of this story is I got lucky. I walked into the Dixon Herald at just the right moment between my junior and senior year when a reporter was going on maternity leave. So they asked me to fill in for her the entire summer while I was home from school, which I did. And that was the first time I ever worked at a newspaper. And I was so excited about it and had so many different stories that really captured everything, just it really drove home the fact that yes, this is what I wanted to do with my life. After that summer, I stayed freelance. I did freelance stuff for Dixon while I finished up my senior year. And then after my senior year, I moved to Robertson County, where I still live, by the way, and got a job at the Robertson County Times, which is a Gannett-owned paper. So stayed there for about 2 years before they called me up to what we called, quote unquote, the mothership in Nashville, and spent about 7 years in Nashville working in a variety of beats, courts, crime, breaking. I loved breaking news. It's my favorite thing to write. There's just something about it. It's so much fun. Stayed in that job, like I said, for 7 years, had twins with my husband. So then came back out to Robertson County to become an editor. So then I was the editor of the Robertson County Times. And then I became the editor of the Ashland City paper, the Cheatham, Ashland City Times, Cheatham County, you know where that is, I'm sure. And then they added Sumner to me. And now I have Clarksville. So I have in my purview currently, I have Stewart, Houston, Montgomery, Robertson, Cheatham, and Sumner counties.
Which sounds exactly right with journalism. You become a jack of all trades, covering so many things.
You most certainly do. But yes, I married my husband a year after I graduated, and we've been married going on 17 years, and my twins are now 9 years old, which shocks me and amazes me at the same time, because it's like, where did the time go? I mean, really, where did it go?
I hear that.
I don't know.
I hear that.
And you know all about that. So
yeah, I look at my son's like, what? I'm the parent of a 5-year-old. When did that happen again? Yeah. Yes,
it
I am.
only goes faster. It really does. It goes so fast. And I had somebody the other day who's expecting their first child, and they're like, how did you get through that first year? And I'm like, it's kind of like you're a zombie. I'm kind of walking around in like a zombie haze.
That's for sure. Yeah.
But you make it work.
One thing I'd like to ask, when you say you really get into breaking news, in contrast, that was always my least favorite, ironically, because I think I like to have some time to digest stuff and put it out. And breaking news always really stressed me out because like I didn't have time to review it as much. What was it about breaking news that appeals to you so much?
I have to say it's the adrenaline, to be honest. I
Fair
mean, you're
enough.
so in the moment, and you're so in the moment, and you know that you've got to get it out there because you're competing against all of these other media sources. You're competing against TV, you're competing against other papers, you're competing against bloggers. I mean, anybody and everybody. Social media, everybody's on social media now. So it's just the rush of getting it and getting it right, I might add. It's not just about getting it, but actually getting it right and having it first. It's an adrenaline rush. It really is. But yeah, I mean, that's basically what appeals to me. You're so in the moment. And I've been on cases where you're so in the moment that you don't even realize that hours have just flown by. It just flies by when you're in the moment and you're trying to get everything and get it right and get it out there. So I guess
That's
that's
true.
the big thing. Yeah.
I can see that. The most noticeable ones for me were every type of election night, whether it was national or
Mm-hmm.
local, even at that little bitty, local paper I worked at, the Mayfield Messenger. Like anytime there was an election, we'd go over to the county courthouse, and we'd set up shop. We stood next to there was a counter where the clerks all worked, and then across
Mm-hmm.
from us was a desk. And it was just always understood that was where the radio station got to set up. So they'd come in with their equipment. It was another, just a local radio station. They didn't service anyone but Mayfield. It was just all the Mayfield people, and that filled it up. That's how many of us there were. There were always four of us, two for the paper, two for the radio, and it was just this constant stream of updates from every single
Mhm.
precinct coming in. And yeah, before you knew it, the whole night was gone.
Exactly. And it's funny now because I still get to be involved in some of that coverage on election night where you'd go and you'd set up and the clerks they have it down to a science now. They'll bring you the reports out, they have the copies and they'll bring them to you and you're like, "Oh," and you're probably about halfway done with the first copy when they're bringing you another one and then another one and then another one and it just goes by so fast like you said, but that's part of it. And the fun thing about it is too that most of the people that you're working with from these other quote unquote competitors are friends usually. You know them, they're on the scene with you. You all know each other, you all catch up. Hey, how's it going? How's your family doing? That kind of thing. So it's not like we're all quote unquote cutthroat competitors. Most of us are very friendly with each other. Most of us like to talk to each other and catch up when we're out there together.
Yeah, it's very much like old stories I used to hear during the 80s and the Cold War was still going. Out on the Pacific Ocean, oftentimes Russian fishermen would meet up with American fishermen and they're like, "Hey, how's it going? Whatever." They weren't at war. They didn't care. They're just out there making a living on both sides. But
Right,
it's
exactly.
very much the same way. Yeah, because I crossed paths constantly with television, radio, other newspapers. We weren't pushing each other out of the way. Like we're all here to do the same job, and there's plenty of room to do it. I think the only time we ever had this mentality that we were gonna be aggressive was one time, and this is way back when Hillary Clinton was running in the primary against Obama. So that tells you how far
Mm,
back this was. She came to our town and she was going to have like an event at the Chamber of Commerce. So I got there, and a lot of radio and regional guys were all there first, and they all started warning me and said, "Listen, when the TV people or when the national ones get here, like CNN and ABC or whatever, they're going to try to push you out of the spot. Don't let them do it. This is not their spot. You live here." And so we all sort of locked arms when the national station showed up. It's like, "You're not, don't even try it. We're here and we're staying."
see, that's a good example though of how close you guys all were.
Hmm. Yeah, there were numerous times, and when it's the environment of a small town, especially, there were times where, like, police, if they were covering, like, talking about breaking news, some sort of a shooting or a crime or whatever level it was, there were times where they wouldn't talk to anybody until I showed up because they felt like they could trust me, which
Hmm.
is too edgy. You could argue that maybe I was a little too chummy with them, which that would be a fair argument. But at the same time, my thinking was that whole, you're going to catch more honey with vinegar. So if I was friendly
Okay.
with them, and I always told them, "You tell me where the line is. I'm going right to it. I won't cross it, but I'm going right there to it. So you tell me exactly how far back you want me to be." And just, yeah, there was that understanding there. They felt like they could trust me. I know I felt like I could trust them. And I don't know, looking back, they might have hid some stuff from me that I could have dug deeper on, but it's a small town, some of that's going to happen. Nobody keeps secrets better than small
Well,
towns.
absolutely. Absolutely. And it's funny that you mentioned that because I kind of had the same mentality when it came to relationships within law enforcement. I can remember when I first started out in Robertson County as a reporter after college, uh, I would go up to the sheriff's office and to the local police stations every week, and they would just let me go through the reports, like just go through them all, and I would do it. And now they don't let you do that anymore. Now they have public information officers and they have all these rules and everything. But back then, and we're not talking very far back either, I'm talking about like 2006, 2007 is when I was doing this, but they would literally just let me go through these reports. And I remember reading some of these reports that were just shocking. There's some that stick with me to this day. Would you like to hear some of the most shocking ones?
Oh yes, that's what we're here for. The stories that if we told young people that today, they wouldn't believe us.
Oh my goodness. Well, the first one that really jumps out to me is an account, and the narrative reads like something you would see in a movie. And I remember just the whole time I'm reading it thinking, oh no, 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 don't do it. Don't do it. This couple, they're coming back from a movie and they run out of gas in the middle of nowhere. It was kind of close to Springfield High School, I want to say, back in the day. But it's the middle of the night. They run to the gas station. The closest one is, again, miles up the road, but they get the gas, they come back, and they're at the car, and he's trying to pour the gas into the car. And she's like, do you need to get a little bit of extra light? Takes out a match, lights it. And I'm thinking, no, 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 no. And holds it up. And of course, the car goes up in flames. They end up blowing the car up. Police and fire services come to the scene. We'll come to find out he has an outstanding warrant on him for his arrest. So he gets arrested because they basically blew up their car in the middle of the night. So that one was one you can't possibly ever make up. It was crazy. It was the most ridiculous thing I've ever read to this day. The other one that was very funny.
That one gives me the urge to start chanting, Jerry, Jerry, Jerry.
Yes, yes. I mean, just crazy, crazy, crazy.
But you were saying, sorry.
The other one that really stood out from all that was this guy in, I believe it was Cross Plains, which is a small town in Robertson County, like super small, up in the northern part of the county. And he had this big mouth bass mailbox. Do you know what the big mouth bass mailbox looks like? Right?
Oh yes. Everyone from small towns should know what those
should have. Yes, they've seen at least one big mouth bass mailbox in their lives, I'm sure. Well, the local kids apparently stole his big mouth bass mailbox, and it apparently made the rounds in the local high school for months, where they were just trading it back and forth between each other. It was kind of like a rite of passage. Take possession of this big mouth bass mailbox for however many days or weeks there was to it. But yeah, it was hilarious, because you're like, well, I mean, the kids in a small town, I guess they don't really have anything to do. So their fun thing was just, trading a big mouth bass mailbox.
It's true. Those are sort of stories that if I ever had that and I was telling my kids you don't do anything, all you do is spend time on your phone, they'd look at me like, yeah, like you really made good use of your time as a kid.
Oh, me. Well, and
there was a lot of that.
I grew up in Dixon County, which a lot about Dixon County. Back in the day, there was only one high school in Dixon County. It was in Dixon, but now there are two. There's one in Charlotte and there's one in Dixon. But people would just hang out in parking lots, and they still do that. I find, like, even in Robertson County and other smaller communities, they just hang out in parking lots because there's nothing to do.
Yep. That's how my town was. Yep. Now I don't see it as much. I think it's not as prevalent as it used to be, and I think a big part of that is that kids have iPhones now, and that keeps them occupied. I mean, there's arguments both ways for that. But yeah, because I distinctly remember every weekend there was always this group out in front of Walmart, out in the parking lot, about 4 or 5 pickup trucks out there, and they're just sitting there. That was how they spent their time.
In Dixon County, they were in front of the Blockbuster, where incidentally I had my first job as a teenager.
Blockbuster.
Blockbuster
now we're getting into some good stuff. Blockbuster. I remember Blockbuster. we had a Blockbuster, but I always hated it because we had a Blockbuster and then like just this local run mom and pop place called the Mayfield Cinema. And the Mayfield Cinema was 100 times better than Blockbuster because this guy was a hoarder of old movies, VHS and DVDs. So any movie you wanted, if you didn't mind sifting around, it was there. You would find it. And if you couldn't find it, you probably didn't need to find it, because I'm told he also had a selection off in a back room somewhere.
Oh yeah, most of them do.
Yeah, but
Blockbuster.
Did he
have any sort of filing system, or was it just kind of, there was just no method to the madness? You just went through and tried to find stuff?
There was, the only thing was he had it in sections. So, you had the action section, romance section, then the new release all on the back wall, and then the section where I spent all of my time, the horror section. And it don't even bother asking about filing systems. It wasn't alphabetical. You were lucky if a series of films were all right next to each other. And
Wow.
because he never threw any films out, like by the time they finally shut down, his store was too full. His shelves were so to be stacks of DVDs 3 feet high on top of the shelves because he had nowhere else to put them. But if you wanted to find, that was a place to go to rent a movie. Whereas Blockbuster, you would pay 5 times as much, and maybe they'd have it. You never knew.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Yeah.
people who get nostalgic for Blockbuster, I'm just always like, I hated Blockbuster. It was never.
It was interesting as a first job. I mean, that was the first job I ever had. Um, the thing I loved about it the most was, and I don't know if, I mean, you never worked there, so you probably wouldn't know about this, but we had advanced copies of movies that hadn't come out yet that we
Mm.
could borrow and take home, and screen early. And I felt like such a big shot in high school because I had all the new movies first, before they came out on video or DVD or whatever. And I could invite friends over and be like, hey, you want to watch this movie before it actually comes out? I'm your person. I can hook you up.
You were
So,
torrenting before torrenting was a thing.
yes, yes. But it was fun. I mean, I remember I saw Scream 2 in advance. So I saw it before it was out of the theater because Blockbuster had a copy and we were allowed to take it home and screen it. That's the main one. I think I remember some other, and it's funny you mentioned horror novels and horror stuff, horror books, horror movies, horror everything. I'm into the same thing. So it's kind of do you remember a movie called Night Watch?
I remember the name. I never saw it, but I remember it.
That was one of the ones I saw early.
Ah, nice,
So
nice. I can't.
yes.
I cannot remember the last horror film I saw because my wife doesn't like them, and now with kids, I do know the last one I saw. It was Halloween. Halloween Kills. I was able to get that through HBO Max because I had a really quiet day working from home. Everybody was gone, and so I watched like half an hour and go get something done. Watch another half hour and get something done. That's the last horror film that I was able to see. But before that, it was probably the Halloween film before that because it has to be a big deal for me to take the time to watch it because I don't have the time anymore. It's sad. It must be why I write horror stories so much because I don't get to watch them.
I love them. And I actually enjoy reading more than watching. Um, I guess I should say I'm a big King fan. Are
I
you a
love.
big King? Yeah,
I
King fan?
yes, I used to have a tower of Stephen King novels. Read the entire Dark Tower series.
Nice.
Everything but The Wind in the Keyhole. I want to get that one because that way I can have the last one I read will be good. Everybody hated the last one in that series.
Well, I like to, and I love King stuff too. I'm eclectic though. I'll tell you the last things that I've read. I'm currently reading, um, The Forbidden Door. It's Dean Koontz's Jane Hawk series. It's book 4 in that
Okay.
series. The book before that I read was the case of the murderous Dr. Cream. Have you heard of it?
No, but it sounds like something that'd be right up my alley.
It's about a serial killer who
Um,
operated around the same time as Jack the Ripper, but he was not only active in England, he was also active in Canada and the United States.
okay.
There are many who are convinced that Cream was Jack the Ripper, but there's no way Cream could have been Jack the Ripper because Cream was actually in an Iowa prison at the time of the Ripper killings.
See, if this were a podcast or a Netflix series, my wife would be all over this story. As a book,
She
she
likes
probably
serial
won't want.
killers.
She hates horror, but boy, she loves those serial killer
Seriously.
documentaries.
Oh my goodness. See, I
She's a,
love all of it.
she's a
I
walking
do.
meme.
I love all of it. But yeah, the case of the murderous Dr. Cream was the one I just finished reading before the new one that I'm on, the Jane Hawk book. And before that, and I literally waited on the book before Cream because I had heard all the hype about it and I was like, yeah, hype, hype, hype. It's Where the Crawdads Sing. Have
Okay,
you have you heard of
I haven't
it?
heard of this one.
Seriously?
I have not. Yeah, I
It's
don't get to
it's
experience a
everywhere.
whole
It's
lot.
it's been everywhere. It's been everywhere, and I'd heard about it and heard about it, and people at work, at Tennessee and stuff were like, "Have you read it yet? Have you read it yet?" And I'm like, "I'm kind of waiting because it's got so much hype and stuff built up with it, and I just want to have it die down a little bit, and then I'll read it." And I did, and I really enjoyed it. It's about a girl who literally gets abandoned in the marshes of North Carolina, and it takes place in like the 50s and the 60s. And she basically grows up all by herself out in the marshes, and then she's accused of murdering a well-to-do city boy, I guess you'd call him, that she once had a thing with when she was younger. And it's all about how she grew up and everything she went through, and then she's on trial for killing this guy and everything. And it was really good. It was really well done, and I was so kind of upset at myself that I didn't read it sooner. But they're making a movie out of it now. But yeah, I'm
Okay.
eclectic. I like to read all kinds of things. Like, I don't stick with a certain genre, but if I had to actually say my favorite one would be in the horror novel and true crime kind of genre.
I tend to, if I collect anything now, I'm attracted to books that I've made kind of a circle of friends who are independent writers and publishers. And whenever
Mhm.
they have a book, I'm interested in getting it for twofold. One, I like to support my own because I'm trying to get stuff out there, so I want to support anybody else doing the same. But also, I find a story that I know the person who wrote it is always, I don't know, it's inherently a little more interesting to me because I know a little bit of their thought processes, so I
I
can
could
kind of
see
see
that.
them telling the story, and that makes it fun and interesting for me. So yeah, more and more my bookshelf is getting filled up with those. Although I did recently read Isaac Asimov's robot trilogy, so stepped away over to science fiction. But since I do like science fiction, my two big
Hmm.
things, horror and Star Trek. So
I like that. Um, yeah, I actually have you read something called The Night Circus?
no, but it sounds good.
It is. It's kind of in the sci-fi sort of rangy kind of it's kind of hard to describe, but I think you'd like it if you read it. My brother is a big sci-fi person. He loves the sci-fi genre. It's funny because during Christmas he actually got we do kind of an exchange dirty Santa kind of thing, and he said he got this gift for me, thinking about me and mine, but they were two books that I had already read. So I was like, dang it. And one of them was that one, The Night Circus. And I said, that's a really good book. And he actually, I don't think he had read it. And I said, you need to get it and read it. So he actually took his own gift back so that he could read it. It was kind of funny, but I love all kinds of different genres. I'll pretty much read, any and everything. So, of course, who hasn't read Harry Potter, right?
Oh yes, and Harry Potter's another example of what I was just thinking of. Every so many stories that I read that bug me are the way they portray journalists. And Harry
Hmm.
Potter is a major offender of this, in my humble opinion. Like one friend of mine who wrote a book I read about a girl in a small town who like starts developing these amazing powers. The one journalist in the story is this local guy for like this local TV station, and he's portrayed as like just sleazy and just
Yeah.
easy to dislike. And I'm just like, I actually worked in a TV news studio for a few months. So I've been in that setting. And then like when I was with the newspaper, I've worked alongside them. I'm not going to say everybody's perfect, but it's like, they're not all just sleazy guys. So many of them are either really have a passion for putting the truth out there, or they're just trying to make a living. They're like, for the
Hmm.
most part, there's nobody working in a local journalist setting is like this ivory tower level of just rich jerk. That it just doesn't exist because there's not much money in journalism. So
No, there's
uh,
not. You're
and
right.
and so whenever I see them characterized that way, it just, I don't know, it bugs me. And Harry Potter didn't the first time I read it because I was younger, but as I've gotten older and I read a Skeeter, uh, every
Hmm.
time I see her, I just kind of, I don't know, she just irritates me. And then when I see how like the government made use of the magical newspaper, And of course, it also illustrates why there needs to be more than one newspaper, I guess, and not run by your government. But I don't know, it just every because I recently did like a binge watch with my wife of the Harry Potter series, and this time around as I watch it, I'm just angry when I read the what's the
Yeah.
newspaper in that series called? I can't remember now. The
Oh my goodness, you would
it's not
ask me that, and it's gonna bug me.
the the
Oh,
Qu- the Quibbler is the one that
yeah.
what's her name, Luna Lovegood and her dad did, but which is sort of like the fringe crazy newspaper. But the mainstream one, I can't think of it off the top of my head, but yeah, that was when I watch it, it just bugged me because I'm just like, that's not like, I'm not saying the entire field is full of perfect people, but guys, it is not this sort of concerted uh conspiracy of putting misinformation out there.
It just hit me, by the way. It's the Daily Prophet.
There it is, the Prophet. Thank you, the Daily Prophet. Yep.
You're welcome. Yeah, no, and you're absolutely right. It's like, with Skeeter and everything, pretty much you would see how it was skewed in the Daily Prophet. And it was obvious skew,
Hmm.
and it's just that. And another thing that really comes to mind for me is 1984 as well. Have you read
Yeah,
80?
I
Yeah.
have read that one.
I described that book the other day. I was talking to somebody else in the business, another journalist, and I was like, that book, 1984, was the most depressing piece of literature I've ever read in my entire life.
It's a
It's
bummer.
just,
Yeah.
oh my goodness, it gets worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And then by the end, you're just like, I am just in a hole of despair right now. It really is.
What?
But just classic examples of what you see is media and how it's influenced, and not for good, and not realistically at all. When
Yeah.
you look at the current state of things, but yet you hear people fake news and all that stuff. So it's very disheartening.
One that I loved, and it did not get a whole lot. It made no traction, but I'm a big comic book fan, and my favorite is Superman. Like, to me, Superman will always be number one. Nobody's ever going to top him. And because of that, I'm a little biased. Any sort of Superman media that comes out, I'm interested in it. And the Supergirl series that came out, I really liked it. Final season was a bit of a letdown, but overall it was good. But one of my favorite parts was a part nobody noticed, is where Kara, Supergirl, in her alter ego, she is assigned to work, like throughout the whole series, she works for this media conglomerate called Catgo, and
Mm,
she gets a job at a newspaper underneath. And I forget if they ever said what the name of it was. It might have just been the National City News. But anyway, her boss was a guy named Snapper Carr, and Snapper Carr comes from the comics. But in this series, Snapper Carr is this crotchety, angry, just bitter, like he does everything but chomp cigars, sort of stereotype
oh
of
my
a
goodness.
newspaper man. And but underneath it all, he has this undying passion about discovering the truth, and not only presenting it, but presenting it in a way that is trustworthy. And he's adamant about this. It's like there are times because Kara's constantly butting heads with him, like, but this is the truth. This is the truth. And he's like, well, you haven't proved it. You've got to prove it first. And there's one part in that season where she wants so badly to get this story out there, but he won't do it because she can't prove it, that she does a blog about it. That way he can't stop her. The next day he fires her. She's like, why are you firing me? He's like, because you didn't prove it. And now it doesn't
Mhm,
matter how true your story is. And he only lasted one season. I was so sad because I want more of this guy. That is the newsman that
mhm,
I worked for like 10 years. I worked for guys like that. It's like, if that's what we
mhm.
saw, that I think we would have, I don't know, at least a more, you don't even have to go like the full on Aaron Sorkin level of optimism, but like that
Yeah,
guy,
yeah,
grouchy, grumpy, but underneath it all, it's like, we're telling the truth and we're going to do it in a way people can buy it. And yeah,
yeah.
that was the best. And they didn't do more with it. I was so sad.
And not only that, not only the truth, but you also have to tell both sides. There's always two sides to every story, and
Mhm.
you always have to tell both sides. You can't just, and that's kind of what we're getting at with Harry Potter and 1984 and things like that, where media is portrayed as kind of slanted. It's
Hmm.
because they're showing one side but burying the other. And that's not true journalism. True journalism looks at both sides of every story and puts all the facts out there and lets the reader make up his or her mind as to what they believe is right or true, or which side, they agree with or side with. It's not up to journalism to journal bleh. It's not up for journalists to persuade people. People don't need persuading. People need all the facts so that they can make informed decisions.
Hmm. And sometimes I think we fall into the trap of thinking, okay, we're going to present both sides. Well, sometimes one side isn't really reliable. And I think a classic example of this is like the COVID vaccine misinformation, where people are trying to say it's killing people. Well, it outright isn't. You can make arguments for how effective it is, but it's not killing people. No, like if there's anybody who's died from it, the percentage is so infinitesimally small when compared with the people dying from from the disease. It's like it's not even a factor. And it's like if you're going to when you present them saying that and then acknowledge, okay, well, there's nothing to prove this, then they get mad and they're like, well, you're trying to say that I'm not telling the truth, but you're not accusing them of that. Well, I'm sorry, but truth doesn't always come down 50-50.
Yeah. Um, and I think that with a topic so complex as COVID, I mean, in a disease that we don't fully understand how it works, and how some people can have some symptoms, other people can have other symptoms, and it can kill some people, and then in other people it's completely asymptomatic. I mean, I don't really know. I think we need to have more research done on it. There's just so much out there, and we just have to keep putting it out more and more that we learn. It's a constant process of learning new information and actually putting it out there. But I think a lot of people are wanting to jump the gun and make conclusions and draw conclusions where really there aren't any conclusions to be drawn yet. So that's
Yeah,
another catch.
too true. Yeah. And what we've seen with the pandemic is actually like in real time science at work. And
Hmm.
science doesn't just reach a conclusion and that's it. Science reaches one potential conclusion, then goes back and second guesses it and goes back and revisits. It's like, well, were we right?
Hmm.
Were we right? And sometimes they'll find a different answer. And acknowledging that things have changed since the first time around, it doesn't mean you lied. It means that
No,
new facts came up and you learned more. And it is, but so many people will try to change the narrative along the way. And it's a hard thing. It's a hard thing for researchers and scientists in that sense. And at the same line with either with COVID or with any other news event that's going on where facts emerge that change the perspective, it's not that the newspapers or even elected officials necessarily in this case, even though I don't really trust elected officials, but it's not proof that they were lying if facts emerge later. It's and they have to change their tune a bit. That's called learning. That's
exactly.
and yeah, it's that's the ongoing struggle of yeah, transparency. I think they always say we want to be transparent, and that's good. But I think if I was to tell anybody to add anything to it, you need to be transparent, and you need people to believe you're transparent. Because if
Hmm.
they don't believe you, it doesn't matter how transparent you're being. Nothing's going to matter. A wise man once said, "Perception is reality," and I think he was
Hmm.
right.
I agree. I really do. And I think you perfectly nailed it with the description of science and how things evolve and change. You can't just accept that, yeah, they said it one time, so that's the be all end all. No. It's an ongoing evolutionary process where you're constantly trying to learn more about this crazy disease that has basically gripped the whole world. And it's in real time, just like you said. But there are people out there who will just jump all over anything that's printed and say, well, you said this back then, now why are you changing your tune now? And because we have to. So that's it's difficult. It's difficult when you come across people like that. And I've had conversations with people about that very thing. So I think just being as open and honest as possible is the only way you can really do it. But there are some people out there that they'll never accept that you're being open and honest with them no matter what. And that's
Yeah.
difficult. You have to come to terms with that.
Yeah. And we'll close that conversation by saying the wise man who told us perception is reality, that was Vincent Kennedy McMahon, owner of the
Huh.
World Wrestling Federation.
Nice. Nice.
I wouldn't trust him with a lot of things, but I think on that one he was right.
Yes. Speaking of wrestling, my kids actually enjoy watching WWE as it's now called, but
Yes, it is.
yeah,
Yes.
I don't know
And
about all that.
as somebody who put my parents through the same, I will say to you, I'm so very sorry for what you are dealing with, and will probably continue to deal with at least through high school. It'll be difficult.
Well, and my husband actually told my daughter that she couldn't watch it anymore because she tried to move at school.
I will
Oh,
say that the moves they do now, as compared to the past, are insane. Their
yeah.
careers are like half as long as they used to be. There's like Hulk Hogan was still doing that leg drop on people in his 60s. These kids doing it now, they're going to be in wheelchairs by the time they're 40.
Yes.
So,
Yes. I mean, back in the day, about the worst thing that could happen to you was you get hit by one of those folding chairs, right?
yeah, you might
Yeah.
even, as a form of parenting, every time wrestling comes on, hit your kids one good time with the chair, and that way they'll associate the pain with it. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Anybody
I
listening?
know.
I'm kidding.
I know.
I'm not worried about you, but anybody else listening, I am totally kidding.
Oh my goodness. But yeah, I mean, it's just completely different. Like again, we're talking about evolution of things, things just get
Hmm.
in more and
They
more.
do.
I mean, I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that people's attention spans are so small these days. Everybody's competing with, the amount of screen time you get before somebody these days. I mean, if you
Hmm.
think about it, back when, and I know how old you are because, we've talked about this. But back when we were kids, there weren't how many dadgum channels are there now? I mean, seriously, on
Are there,
TV, there's millions of these channels, there's streaming apps, there's all kinds of stuff that didn't exist when we were kids back in the day. So, I mean, it gets more and more, the ante is up like
hmm
significantly these days because people are just there's so many different mediums and things out there that you can get into and everybody's
30,
competing.
32 channels. That's what we had. I distinctly
Yeah.
remember 32.
Yeah.
Because we
Yeah.
had
I
that
think
brown box with that dial that went left and right.
yes, yes. I
That's what.
remember that thing and it was so pathetic.
Yep.
But yeah, and then actually before then, we didn't even get that brown box with the little slider thingy on it until gosh, I'd say I was probably approaching middle school when that happened. And we just had like the TV with a little knob that you turned and the rabbit ears, for a long time when I was in, elementary school and stuff.
Hmm.
And I was
Yep.
so jealous of my friends because they had cable and I didn't. So,
We had
yeah.
cable as far back as I can remember, but out of all those 32 channels, I really only needed two,
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty
Nickelodeon
much
and
the
Disney,
same.
and I was good.
It's pretty much how it is today, isn't it? I mean, you
Mm,
got all these different channels. I can't even tell you how many I got on my TV.
I can tell how many I
Um,
have. I have zero because we rely on streaming.
well, there you go. I mean,
Hmm.
I have I have Uverse, but only
Mm.
because, my husband likes to watch anime and my kids like to watch, Toon Network and stuff.
Oh,
So we're like, okay.
it's too bad
Um,
we're nearing the end of this. I have so many anime stories of people trying to get me into anime and failing.
really? Oh my
Oh,
goodness.
they
Oh my
tried
goodness.
so hard, and to the point where for decades I hated anime, like passionately hated it. I have since like, okay, you just tried to force feed it to me. I'm still not into it, but to each their own.
What have you watched? Now I'm genuinely curious.
Let's see. I know I watched Dragon Ball Z. Everybody's seen it during Dragon
Hmm.
Ball Z, I think. Um, and the one and oh gosh,
Bleach?
caught Yu-Gi-Oh a bit. There
Yu-Gi-Oh?
was
Yeah.
Yu-Gi-Oh, but there's one somewhere before between those two that they pushed on me that I couldn't get in. It might have been Gundam, might have been it.
Yeah.
whichever
I've
one.
seen, let's see, Bleach, which is
I'm
the
familiar
big
with
one,
Bleach. Yeah.
the big
One
one.
one that even when I hated it, I said this is a great movie. It was just a single film. Was called Tokyo Godfathers.
Huh.
I thought that was a phenomenal movie, and I would still recommend it to anybody. It was just if a kid who could not stand the thought of anime watched that thing and walked away like that was amazing, it must have been really good. So it was a good movie. I liked it a lot. So I recommend that one. If he's an anime guy, he's probably seen it already. He probably thinks it's just cute because it doesn't have
I'll
any.
have to ask him.
And I
I'll have
think
to
the
ask
reason I
him.
liked it, it didn't have any of the typical anime tropes. There were no giant monsters. There were no giant robots. It was just three homeless guys.
Huh.
That was the story.
I will tell you what, like I've been married going on 17 years to my husband, right?
Mhm.
And bless his heart, love his heart, he has tried and tried and tried to get me into anime. Well, he finally succeeded about, I'd say probably about 5 years ago, but I'm not into all of it. Like I don't watch, but maybe I've seen Bleach, obviously.
Mm.
Um, but there was one, and it's still ongoing, by the way, on the
Wonder if I know what
cartoon
this is.
Adult Swim. It's on Adult Swim when it's out. It's called Food Wars.
Okay, it wasn't what I thought.
It's kind of it I'm trying to think of how to describe it because it's so over the top ridiculous in places that I just laugh at it so hard. But one of their abilities in this show, it's about a bunch of kids who are in Totsuki Academy, which is a cooking school. So they create food, and they have food wars where they'll have their food judged, and whoever the winner is given glory and promotion and all that fun stuff. But in some of these dishes, when they're tasting them, they're so good that they blow their clothes off. It's
Of
just
course.
so funny. And I'm like, really? But yeah, I mean, you just laugh at it because it's just over the top. It's so over the top. But yeah, my husband and I would just crack up every
That's,
time it comes on.
that's why I like when the recent ones I've spotted were like anime horror, and it's so absurd. Like one where I distinctly remember someone like got their head ripped off or something, and then like Old Faithful inside their body somehow erupts a
Yeah.
geyser of blood, like to the point that it's not even horrifying. It's just there's not that much juice in the human body, and it's
No,
all shooting out of this. And it was yeah, it's like I'm supposed to be scared or horrified by this, and all I am is laughing. So yeah,
exactly.
just
It's
another
it's
example of why anime and I are not going to cross paths. I'm too old now. It's not going to happen.
I'm telling you though, if you ever have an opportunity to watch Food Wars, it's hilarious. And it takes, I mean, if you have like a day where you're stressed out or you have a rough day at work or whatever, it's perfect because it's just so funny.
And I have an
And
hour that I just of my life I don't need anymore.
yeah, do you have you have HBO Max, don't you? Just
I had it for a month actually.
oh,
Yeah,
okay.
that's when like it's one of those where every now and again there's been a couple of movies I wanted to watch, so I subscribed to it for a month so that I could watch those movies and then quit. So yeah, my
That's
recent thing
actually
I
pretty
saw was
smart.
I recently saw Suicide Squad at last, which gosh, I loved that movie way more than I
Did
thought I
you?
would. Yes, I did.
Well, it's actually on my DVR right now, so I need to watch it.
I
Um,
do not watch it with your kids, but
okay.
I did love it. And
I watched it with my husband,
I watched a
but
couple episodes of Peacemaker afterwards, and those were good. So yeah. Although
wow.
you see so much of John Cena that you almost feel married to him when it's over. A little awkward.
Nice.
Yeah. But anyway, I think it probably is time to wrap this up. This has been a great conversation here. Are there any other those stories of your time in the field that stand out before I let you go?
Um, hmm. Well, I mean, not as humorous, obviously. I've done a lot of crime and breaking and court stuff, so a lot of mine have been more somber.
Mhm.
Um, in that regard, I've witnessed an execution, so that's kind of one of the things too that stands out. To actually witness something like that. and have the ability to write about it, and let
Mm,
people know what it's like, because honestly, it was like nothing like I ever thought it was going to be like.
mm,
Um, First of all, you're in the dark. I didn't realize that you'd be in the dark watching something like that, but you are. Um, and you have other people there, which is a comfort, which is good. But
mhm,
um, but those are, that one comes to mind as one of the hallmark experiences for me, because a lot of people have never seen anything like that. Um, I've also, I've interviewed several, I would say, killers. Some of them admitted, some of them not. They were later convicted. I sat in a courtroom with a serial killer, Reed, the fast food killer, um, back when he had a court hearing, and it was crazy. I covered part of the Marsha Trimble trial whenever it came back up, in Nashville. I mean, there's been a lot of high profile stories and cases that I've had a hand in, and seen things, And then, of course, nobody can forget the 2010 flood when it happened. I was in the middle of that as well. And I remember going into houses in Nashville and seeing the watermarks like up at the ceiling and thinking, goodness gracious, wow. I mean, you see things like that, and it blows your mind. I
mhm.
mean, seeing a house that was once sitting in a neighborhood now sitting like, 50 yards down the road in the middle of the street,
I can
stuff
relate to
like
that.
that.
Yep. Saw that
Stuff
just
like that.
recently, in fact. Yep.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yep.
I mean, there's been some other floods. Like, I mean, my husband, love him, he and his dad do a lot of charity work. And they went to Waverly to help them rebuild, after the flood they had there, last year. And they talked about how it's just completely, you would not even believe it. And I'm thinking, yeah, it's crazy what Mother Nature is capable of, and how things like that, when you see it's so mind-boggling.
Mhm.
Um, but just seeing a whole lot of things. I'm honored that I get to tell the stories that go along with that. I'm honored that people trust me enough to tell me their stories. Um, it's a gift and it's an honor. And I think a lot of journalists, are aware of that. I mean, we all know how much people trust us to tell their stories. Um, so continuing to do the work that we do, like I said, is just a gift.
Very good. Yeah, I can attest to that. I always tell people would say that was a great story. I say, well, I'm just telling their story. That's what's great.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah, it's your story.
Yep.
I'm just putting it into words.
Yep. So I totally get that point of view. Yep. That's a good one. All right. I think that's a good note to end on. So we'll close out. So thanks so much again. I appreciate you taking the time.
No, thank you for having me. Like I said, I've really enjoyed it.
All right, cool. Hopefully we can do it again sometime.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks, Nicole. Thanks for that conversation. Really appreciate it. It was a lot of good insight and a lot of good thought there for us to chew on. So, yeah, I appreciate the time. As we wind things down, makes me think of a conversation that I had with someone once where they asked me, do you even remember Walter Cronkite? And I had to say, well, honestly, I don't directly remember him, no. However, I did actually study him. So for whatever that's worth. Anyway, um, yeah, news. I think that the big takeaway that news can and should be news is definitely unearthing truths that are hidden. But what it also is, and this is what I definitely agree, has sort of been lost in the perception of people. News is not necessarily, it's not supposed to be this consistent barrage of opinions and thoughts and analyzing what happened. So for so long, what news was just saying, "Here's what happened," and that was it. Sometimes I agree with the notion that we need a little bit more than just here's what the uh, a legislature said, and then that's the end of it. Sometimes if legislature says something and there's a chance that legislature is lying, it is good to go and prove it. But there was a time where Walter Cronkite was a prime example. It's just like, here's what they said, here's what we discovered. That's the way it is. That's how he ended every show. That's the way it is. And it's unfortunate that we've reached the point that we are. There's a lot of things to blame. If I'm going to lay the blame at any one thing, uh, years ago, it's when they decided to start doing 24-hour news cycles on television. I think that got the ball rolling in a lot of ways. There are other things as well. Politics played a role, and but yeah, we are where we are. I do hope that we can reach the point where trust is rebuilt, but time will tell. Anyway, as we close out, I'm going to move over to the cheap plugs of this thing. I did mention at the beginning, Patreon. You can go to my Patreon page if you'd like to show some support, patreon.com/Matt Shore. We update that every week, and it's not expensive at all. Just $1 a month will get you something. So I hope you'll consider that. Also, of course, there is the merchandise page on my website, mattshore.net. If you want to hop over there and check out some of the books that I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, got a whole lot of options there you might consider. And of course, spread the word on social media. That's fantastic. I do also want to say that this is a production of Shore Manor Studio, and you can find that on Facebook at facebook.com, on Instagram, and on Twitter, both at Shore Manor, if you want to follow us there. And you can also check us out on YouTube, where we have podcasts like this one in their entirety. Just look up Shore Manor on youtube.com. Check us out. Or if you are so inclined, tinyurl.com/Shore Manor YouTube. And would also invite you to follow our newsletter, tinyurl.com/Shore Manor newsletter. If you want to sign up there, monthly newsletter. We promise we won't bombard your mailbox, but you'll get updates about this podcast and other events that we've got going on. I definitely hope you will consider that. And if you would like to follow me directly, in addition to visiting my website, mattshore.net, I am also on several social media channels. You can follow me on Twitter at @TheMattShore. You can follow me on Instagram at The Shore. And now you can follow me on TikTok at The One Matt Shore. That's the numeral one Matt Shore. So thanks for checking out another episode. Thanks for listening to it this far. If you're still here, I appreciate it. And just take care of yourselves out there. And of course, keep reading and keep listening. Thanks.